What's up, everybody? Welcome back to For Him 2013's channel. Today we're back with another live stream after so many months of not doing any live streams, but I just want to say thank you guys for your patience, and I just want to say thank you guys for your support and everything that you guys have done to help this move forward. This is something of what I like to call a movement by which I deliberately I dedicate myself to inspiring those that are out there who just need the extra push, the extra motivation, who may be going through something that people unfortunately may not understand. I'm not saying that I have all of the answers or that I completely fully understand each and every last one of you guys' situation, but I do this in the hopes that it will give you it will convey some type of understanding in regards to daily life struggles and things that you might be thinking about that again, you feel like that no one else may understand. Hopefully this upcoming series, which by the way is called, you guessed it, Fire Series. I titled it Fire Series because the acronym that it stands for is From Within We Rise Empowered. And sometimes as an individual we have to take a look at ourselves, just kind of step back and examine ourselves and say, hey, what is it that I can possibly do? What is it that myself can possibly do to sort of overcome these challenges? And I'm not putting the message out there that you can't depend on anyone else, because I mean, if someone else is there to depend on and who's willing to help you, then by all means seek that help, because that's important to talk it out with someone else. But this does not discredit the fact that you can do something to help yourself as well. You as a person are always and very much so capable of doing those things to help edify, build yourself up, and to strengthen yourself. And that's what the Fire Series is going to really focus on. And it's going to focus on tackling that person that's on the inside, awakening that strong, ambitious person that's ready to spark the fire of life and ready to just tackle life's challenges. So that's what this is about. Throughout this series, I'm going to be reading you guys a list of poems that I wrote. And for those of you guys who may know about poetry, and for those of you guys who don't know about it, but poetry is, if I can say in short, a play on words that help convey what's going on in the mind. What better way to convey something that's going inside your head than to put it on paper? We have best-selling novels, movies, all different kinds of things, of which started from the mind and somebody placed it on paper. And it was what was taking place in their mind that they had to get it out, whether they conveyed it through a book or whether they conveyed it through a movie. And many of you guys can back me up when I say that sometimes we spend hours reading books, sometimes we spend hours watching TV shows or watching different movies, all of which came from a person's mind. They had a thought, say, oh, this is a reality that I want to convey and get out, and I want people to see and understand it. They write books on it, screenplays, TV shows, movies, and you go to this and you're touched by it, and in some sort of way you say, man, I can relate to that. And why is it that you can relate to it? Because it's an idea, it's a feeling, a thought that took place in a person's mind. They say, hey, I want somebody to understand what I'm going through. And rightfully so, many people can relate to certain movies, TV shows, or books because they connect with that person that way. And poetry is just one of the many avenues that a person conveys how they're feeling, or maybe a vision that they have, or a world as they see it. So today I'm going to be reading to you guys, if you see here off my phone, I'm going to be reading to you guys a poem that I had wrote. Now, mind you, that the poem is a little deep, and we may have to go over a few things a couple of times just to sort of like get an understanding. But most of my poems are, if you think about it, they represent people. In these poems, it's represented by people, and as we go through the poem, I'm going to explain to you guys the different areas of what the poem means. The poem is rather deep and maybe in some areas aggressive, but at the very least educational, and it does convey a message in which I would like for you guys to understand in the end. So rightfully so, let you guys see that. I don't know if you can't see it. Okay, camera's not zooming in, but the poem, I titled the poem Fire, which is sort of the base inspiration of my series. And I'm going to go ahead and read it, and you guys may not get it at first, you may or may not get it, but you can always just let me know in the comments of what you think about it. So the title of this poem is called Fire. All right, let's go ahead and read it. They say don't play with fire, but it burns like a constricting wire around my ever suffocating lung, gripped by the plier. The kind of pain that distracted my tormented mind from an infinity lapse divided in time. Only a half memory smothered in its ashes, only born to be raised hopeless. The kind of light fueled by the oxygen of grief, set ablaze its furies to stubble its fears. Around lie the remnant heat of a voided heart pumped with an anger, gripping at anguish to ventilate the rage of generations of despair. I walk through this fire, the bridge that binds rage with hope, and what do I see? An empty vessel voided of memories that consumed its grief, that covered its hatred, that bathed in the vision, a sliver of light through the cracks of darkness. Fire, my bridge to the other world, past the void, into the abyss, a loop of sorrow, until rescued by your warmth, I always saw you as a friend, who understood anything but the cold. But you understand it better than anyone. Perhaps all this time what drew me to you was my frosted way, my cold looks, my still heart like stone needed to be molded by its divine light. So when you look at this poem, it probably sounds like somebody who's just going through a lot. And that can be relative to many of us. You may say, oh wow, it sounds like a person going through a lot. Hey, I understand to some extent that person's pain. It seemed like that they're going through a lot. So you have, in this poem, you have two people, okay? And the majority of the time in these poems is always going to be two people sort of trying to understand one another, or maybe trying to fix one another, or get a message across, or receive a message. So in this case, we're going to go over this poem again. It says fire. It says don't play with fire. They say don't play with fire. It burns like a constricting wire around my ever suffocating lung, gripped by the plier. This kind of pain that distracted my tormented mind from an infinity lapse divided in time. So it's giving you, this first passage is giving you a rough idea of what it means to play with fire and how dangerous it is to play with fire. And what it says is it gives you a vague, not a vague, but a vulgar description of the consequences of playing with fire. It's like a constricting wire around my ever suffocating lung, gripped by the pliers. So we know that fire, if it's too much, if you are surrounded by it, I'm not sure if anybody has ever had that experience, but in theory they say that when you are surrounded by fire, it sort of sucks the oxygen out of that space. So it's very suffocating. It feels like something is it's like if you've ever heard of a boa constrictor, the type of those really big giant snakes, how they said that they constrict you, and the more you try to breathe, they constrict you more. So in theory, that's kind of like what fire is. It's like a boa constrictor. It's slowly taking the oxygen from you. And it says, the kind of pain that distracted my tormented mind from an infinity lapse divided in time. So at this point, we see that there is a person here, and it's sort of giving you a third person perspective of what fire is and how it feels. So you have this person, and then you have it describing fire. Then it says, only a half memory smothered in its ashes, only to be born raised hopeless. So the question is, what does that mean? Only to be born raised hopeless after its half memory smothered by its ashes. So it's saying that fire is, we can assume in theory that fire is another person that it's describing. Okay, so you have this person, and it's describing this other person in the symbol of fire, and it's saying that whatever this person is, it's got the first person's attention, and the first person apparently is going through something, but it's saying that fire has caught his attention so much that it became a distraction, and not necessarily a good distraction is describing, more of a bad distraction. And it says only to be born raised hopeless, meaning that the first person is like, well, I'm already going through something, and I've entered this person's life, and this person is clearly going through something, and almost like it's become a bad influence. And this person is like only to be born raised hopeless. Why? Whereas like this person is saying only thing that I am attracting is misery, negativity, and why is this happening? So it's almost like it's like a type of question. But it says this kind of light, fueled by oxygen of grief, set ablaze its fury to stubble its fears. So this other person that's being described, it's been symbolized as fire. This other person is being described is saying that it's fueled by grief, meaning this person only comes around when grief, misery, and negativity is in the atmosphere, and it sucks it out. It's fueled by it, and it says that it only does this to stubble its fears. It only does it to destroy its fears. So the first person in this situation is acknowledging that the other person is going through something, but the first person, let's just say person one, person two is the fire, person one is just the individual who's trying to understand this whole situation. So person one is saying person two, it only exists, or it becomes relevant when people around it is fearful, miserable, and negativity is in the air and is fueled by it. But it only does this to destroy its own fears. So perhaps maybe person two, aka fire, is has some sort of like insecurity, or maybe it's going through something that it feels strong when it put other people down. And then it says, around lie the remnant of heat of a voided heart, pumped with an anger gripping at anguish to ventilate the rage of generations of despair. So this is very deep, but I want you guys to pay attention to this. So with this being said, around lie the remnant heat of a voided heart. So in different areas, you can see that it's talking about fire. It's using heat. It's using a blaze. It's using oxygen. The things that you think about when you talk about fire. And it says around it lies a remnant of heat of a voided heart, meaning that this person two is missing something. And it's only acting out based on the things that it's missing. And it says, of avoided heart pumped with an anger, gripping at anguish, meaning that it's angry at whatever it is that took something from it. So it's voided of something and it's desperately calling out for it, but it's angry at whatever it is. And it says it's gripping at anguish, meaning that it's angry because it's voided of whatever it is, and it wants to feel a level of anguish. It wants to feel a level of hurt for it, but for whatever the reason is, it can't, because it's voided of it. And again, many of us can relate to that. Perhaps we never been told in our lives that we were loved, and we are so badly angry at maybe somebody in our lives important never told us how they truly felt about us, or that they loved us, or maybe a childhood life that we wish we could have had that we didn't have, and we so badly want that we're angry, maybe at the world, maybe at a loved one or significant other, because they didn't allow us to go through that kind of experience, and we are angry at that, and we want to grip at we want to have a level of anguish and a level of hurt, but it's so voided of us that we can't properly experience that. And then it says, and watch this, it says, gripping in anguish to ventilate the rage of generations of despair. So it's trying to feel a level of hurt and trying to convey and express this hurt, perhaps for decades of years of this type of torment. So person two has gotten to a point where it wants to be understood, and unfortunately it has nobody that understands it. So person one is acknowledging that person two is basically misunderstood and is trying to figure out why. So then it says, I walk through this fire, the bridge that binds rage with hope. Okay, so that first line right there, person one is trying to find a connection, and perhaps maybe person one has already found a connection. It says this is the bridge that binds rage with hope. Perhaps person one is seeing itself as hope and person two as rage. So right now it's trying to make this connection. And then it says, what do I see? Person one is seeing this. It says, an empty vessel voided of memories that consumed his grief, that covered his hatred, that bathed in the vision, a sliver of light through the cracks of darkness. So person one is acknowledging what they see. They see person two as an empty vessel. It's been misguided. Perhaps it's voided of different things that took place in his life, and it just sees somebody just consumed by anger because of what it was not able to experience in this lifetime. So person one understands that person two has a lack of experience in his life, and person two is angry at that, but person one is trying to find that connection. But at the same time, it also sees, wow, this person is like an empty vessel, it's sort of zombified. It says, fire, my bridge to the other world, past the void, but into the abyss, a loop of sorrow, until rescued by your warmth, I always saw you as a friend who understood anything but the cold, but you understand it better than anyone. Perhaps all this time, what drew me to you was my frosted way, my cold looks, my still heart, like stone needing to be molded by his divine light. So here we see person one having understood person two, aka fire's dilemma. It's grief, it's sorrow, it's distress, because at this point they sort of realized that that fire is missing a lot and is trying to make that connection. But then it says, but then person one acknowledges fire. It says, fire, my bridge to the other world. But not so much to the world of which I desire, but it says, pass the void into the abyss, a loop of sorrow, until rescued by your warmth. So it takes a quick turn of, it goes from understanding this person who has a life full of despair and nothingness and a broken, empty vessel, to something being rescued by your warmth. Now, pay attention to that. That is very important, because in life, I seen a post on social media that it showed a woman, a lady. It showed a lady, or it showed like a young man. I forget what it was. It showed a young man with like a small knife through his back, and then it showed an older gentleman or older female. I think it was an older gentleman. Had his hand around the smaller person, and this person had butcher knives, swords, arrows, and a whole lot of other instruments stabbed through his back. And the caption was that it was something along the lines of those who that is those who are more understanding, or more empathetic, or sometimes, you know, the person, I forget what the caption was, but the idea was that you may have had a few dings and few mistakes in your life, but then you are often approached and mostly understood by the person who has simply been through some very similar things. If not, they have been through probably a whole lot more, and they are easily able to sympathize and empathize with you because they know that you've been through it. So person one is acknowledging that person two has been through a whole lot. But at the same time, person one, it almost seems like person one hasn't been through that much, but is realizing, wow, person two has really been through some stuff. And then it says a loop of sorrow until rescued by your warmth. So in a weird kind of way, a person could have missed this. In a weird kind of way, person one was looking at a mirror of themselves, but then they realized, wow, I can really connect with person two. And it almost seems like person two has been through so much more than what I've been through. And in a weird way, it was a rescue. Perhaps person two may have not been acting on that anguish and that rage, but person one understood it. And sometimes you can see a person maybe sitting there quiet, maybe calm, maybe their actions, they may not be out there berserk and destroying things and killing people, but all it takes is, they always say real recognize real, or a person who's gone through the same thing. You can understand somebody else if they've gone through the same thing. A person who has anxiety, a person who may have been assaulted, a person who may have gone through this and that, A and B, whatever the case is, you can understand it. And you can look and say, I know what they've been through. And the person say, how do you know that? It's like, I don't need to simply know. I just know. I just know that this person's been through this. And you're not necessarily judging them. You simply understand them. And person one sees that person two would understand it more than anybody. And then it goes on to say this: I always saw you as a friend. So it seems like person one has always recognized this, but now it's sort of come out and sort of making the realization that it understands it and is speaking its mind on it. It says, I always saw you as a friend who understood anything but the code. Meaning that at one point maybe person two did not act like they went through these kinds of things. Or you know how you've seen somebody and you're like, you know, their life is going great, but you never know what they've been through. You just automatically just judge them and say, oh, they couldn't possibly understand what I go through, because maybe they're not acting on their past. Maybe they're not acting on what they've been through in the past. And I've had that experience before where somebody told me that I couldn't possibly understand something that they've been through. And little did they know what they went through was one of the exact same things that I had went through. But because I didn't let that control me in that sense, or I didn't wear it on the outside, they never would have known what I go through. And you guys can relate to it too, that a person never truly knows what you go through unless maybe you tell them. They say, wow, you went through that, really? It's like, yeah, I just never showed it. I just continued on with my life. I just didn't let it shape me and mold me that way. And then it says, I always saw you as a friend who understood nothing but the code. So person one is saying they couldn't, at some point I thought you couldn't have possibly understood what I went through. But it says you understand it better than anyone, right? So it acknowledges you understand me. You understand everything that I'm going through. Then it says, perhaps all this time what drew me to you was my frosted way, my cold looks, my still heart like stone needing to be molded by his divine light. So right there it says what drew me to you is the fact that we did go through something, and because of that you understand me better than anybody. At first I didn't know that you could possibly understand somebody like me. Perhaps person one was looking sort of like for what do you call that, I guess closure, a level of closure, a level of understanding to say, hey, is there anybody out there that understands me? And then it says, like me, we needed something molded by his divine light. So person one is saying, you understand me better than anybody. I didn't think that you understood me, but you do. And the more that I got to know you, I found that connection. And that's what I started off with this conversation in this video, is that the title of the series is From Within We Rise Empowered. And that does not discredit the fact that you can't lean on somebody else, somebody who's able to understand you, who's able to sympathize and empathize with you of what you're going through. It doesn't mean that you can't go to somebody else, but at the same time, it does not mean that you yourself can't do something about it. So you doing something about it, it doesn't mean holistically you. A lot of times you making a step to redemption, or you're making a step to empowering yourself and building up that level of confidence, is maybe seeking help. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. So I just want to say, guys, thank you all. I know this video was a little lengthy, but I do hope that you did receive something great from it, and that I hope that you receive a level of encouragement to say that, hey, if you are that person out there, don't feel like that you can do anything possible to help yourself, or that you don't feel like anybody understands you. There's somebody out there who understands you, and they may be looking at you and say, hey, I know what that person is going through. Maybe they're scared to talk to you, but you never know unless you open up just a little bit, maybe even allow a person the opportunity to try to understand some sort of part of you. You will never know. But at the same time, you are fully capable of helping yourself, and there are things that you can do to empower yourself and to reach within, to show that you're not alone, and that you are completely able and have the ability to help yourself. Just say thank you guys for joining me on this live stream, and as always, I'll catch you next time.